today I thought I'd go through a little bit of test-driven development while we develop a time-to-live cache using property wrappers. So what a time-to-live cache is it's literally something that holds a cache value for the time that you want it to live for. So if we say 5 seconds, if we try and access that value within 5 seconds, we'll get that value. If we try and access it outside of the 5 seconds, we'll get nil. So ChatGPT's helpfully given me a little problem statement for us to work on. So we need to create a cache system that stores value in memory with an expiration time. Once that value has expired, once the time to live has expired, the cache should automatically return nil instead of the stored value. You will use a custom property wrapper to manage the cache, handle the time to live, and invalidate the values once the time to live is reached. So the requirements are that we create a property wrapper called cache that will store a value of any type, allow you to specify a time to live in seconds, invalidate the cached value after the time to live expires, and return nil once the time to live has expired. And the cache value should persist as long as the time to live is valid. And so this is an example usage that we want. So we just want this property wrapper here to pass the time to live in, and we set it like this. So let's dive into Xcode and see how we go about this. So I've just got a blank project here with some Swift testing added, but nothing else. Let's just go back and grab my problem statement for now. So let's just take these and put them there. Okay. So for my first test that for test-driven development, I want to write a test that fails. Right now I don't have anything, so it's not even going to compile, but that's okay. We just need somewhere to start. So let's just delete this and get rid of that. So I think the first test that I want to write is going to be test that I can create a property wrapper that returns a value. So I want to create a property wrapper called cached that returns a value. Okay, so for something like this, I think we will write. I want to write at cached at cached var value is going to be an int, and let's say 5 for now. And I want to, my expectation is that if I create a value with that property wrapper, when I call it, when I ask for this value, it should be 5 because that's what I've set. We don't need to worry about anything like the caching so far. That's all we need. So we run that. It can't compile at the moment as expected. So let's go here and let's make our object. So I've got a helpful Swift by Sundell document here where we can just look at how we actually set up a property wrapper. So we want to, do you know what? I'm going to take this straight away and pop that there. We are going to have something cached. We don't need any did set behavior. We just want to set the wrap value like that. And yep, I've set it to at the moment to be a string. So we're going to go in here, change this to an int, and hopefully we should get a build, and that passes. So let's name our test. So this is test that. What should I call this? Test that property wrapper cached correctly returns int. Value. It's always a little bit tricky when you're getting started to first write that first test and also to work out what you want to name it sometimes. So I'm going to go with this for now. It does the job. but I might go back and rename it afterwards. But let's not hold up and just move on. So the one of the key elements here is that we need it to store any type. So if we put an int in, we'll get an int back. If we put a string in, we'll get a string back. So I'm now going to write another test. Func cached correctly returns a string value. So if we put a string in, we'll get a string back. So let's go ahead and write another failing test. Var value, this time string, my test string. And if we expect that, we expect that when we request it, we should get my test string. Now if I run that, that won't compile because, whoops, I need to put that one there. And you'll see that because I'm trying to specify a string, it's not happy with that. And that's because at the moment our cache only accepts the wrap value as an int. So now I'm going to have to go and make this generic over any value that we pass in. So I can do that by adding, should be able to just do it by changing int to value. So whatever value we put in, now cached is specialized over that value's type. So now I've done that for a string. If I run my tests, hopefully that should work. Brilliant. Okay, so there's two passing tests now. So I'm happy with that. So store, I'm going to just make a little done list over here so we can work on. So we can store a value of any type. Okay, so now we need to specify the time to live. Okay, so we need to be, we want to be able to write in here, I think it was time to live 5. If I just go back to here, yeah, time to live, I need to pass it in there. So let's just try and write this test. So again, because I haven't written that functionality, I've now got a problem where this won't compile. So I need to pass in the time to live. So I think if I just go back to my object here, and I add a, I'm going to actually call, no, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call it TTL for now. And the time to live, and I think let's just pass in an int. I'm going to pass in the time as an int for now. Might want to change that later, but I think that should be fine for now. I'm going to need to update this as well, because wherever we use the property wrapper, we need to specify a time to live. So that's time to live. It's going to be 5 there as well. And now we just want to make sure that those compile. We don't need to actually do anything with that time to live yet. And they do. Brilliant. So that allows us to specify the time to live. Okay, so I think happy with that. Let's move that to done for now. Now, we want to invalidate, the next thing we want to do is invalidate the cache value after the time to live expires. Okay, so now we're getting into the meat of the actual caching, and this is where it gets interesting, because we now need to somehow get control of the time in our test, because obviously if we set a cached value, we need to somehow move forward 5 seconds in time in our test. And that's tricky because the tests just run instantly. So if you set a time, generally we're accessing the value instantly, the moment up, straight away. So somehow we're sort of aware that we're going to need to get hold of the time. Okay. So let's have a think about this. I'm just going to write test function. I want to test that I'm going to test that the cache is invalidated after. I want to check that it's invalidated after time to live has passed. Okay. Let's have a think about that. How are we going to do that? So I quite like to just start with comments in plain English first to see what I'm going to do. So I'm going to need to set a property, set a, what do I want to do here? Okay. I'm going to set a property wrapper. I'm going to do the same as before. So I'm just going to pass in my string, and I can just write this, my test string. Okay, so I want to set that. I want to move the time forward by 5 seconds, and I'm picking 5 seconds here because the time to live is 5 seconds, so I want to go move it past that. And then I'm going to expect that the value is nil. Okay, because we've gone past the time to live. So let's just see what happens if we try and run that. That builds, which is good. But at the moment, we haven't got any sort of invalidation methods in there. It just returns the string that we passed in. So let's have a think. So now let's go to our cached value. And I think we want to we basically, our wrap value, if the time is past 5 seconds, we want to return nil. So the first thing, we need to store this time to live. So let TTL be an int, and let's do self.ttl equals TTL. And I'm going to call this time to live here once we're within our object, just so it's really clear to anyone using this in the future what we're working with. Now, wrapped value, it needs to return nil. Now let's just check that the test still passes. So as we're doing test-driven development, we want this to be going all the time. We want to be running our tests regularly to check that we haven't broken anything and everything still compiles. So we're going to want wrapped value now to be nil, to be optional. And if I change that to optional, what do I get? Yeah, okay, so I've updated that because it's caching. Sometimes it's going to return a value, sometimes it's not. So that means my wrapped value needs to be optional. That means I just need to update these tests because these could return optionals. So that should be fine. So let's just build that and check that we're working. Brilliant. So, well, I guess just before we do that, we actually need to complete this, I think. So we need to somehow pass in that we need our property wrapper to know what the current time is, and we need to be able to move that time forward. So what I'm going to use for this is a really helpful function that we can get from core animation, and that is CA current media time, and that returns the current absolute time in seconds. I think this is a really helpful class when you want to get control of time, because the production class can still get the current time, but we can do something like add 5 to it, and it's a really human readable way to understand that we're moving forward 5 seconds. So if I go back to my test, I'm going to let the current time equal CA current media time, and I think we're going to need to import core media. Where does that live? Core animation. Sorry, core animation. Might just be able to get that from UIKit like that. Brilliant. Okay, so now we have a way to get the current time, and we're going to want to pass that current time into time to live. So we would ideally pass in the current time, and because it's, we could obviously pass it in just as a value, as the current time, but because we want to be able to update that value, I'm going to pass it as a closure so that every time we request a value from the property wrapper, it checks the current value of the closure. Hopefully that makes more sense when you see this. We're going to go in like this, and we're just going to pass in the current time like that. Okay. Now that's not going to build because we now have an extra argument of current time. So what I like to do now is I'm going to add another initializer. So we've got our production initializer that we don't really want to be passing the current time in. We want it to just use the system one. But for our test, we've got one that we're going to inject. So let's do init wrapped value is value, and time to live is an int, and current time is it's going to be a closure that returns the current, that returns a CF time interval, which itself is just a double. Here, it's just a type alias for double. So there's an initializer that we can use for a test, and for that we're going to then store our current time. Let current time be a closure that returns a CF time interval, and now I can do self.wrapValue is wrapValue, self.time to live is TTL, and self.current_time is current time. We need to mark this as escaping because it's escaping we're storing it as a property, so it's escaping the initializer. And then we just need to fix this production one here, and so I think let's do self.current time equals, and this is if we set it up in our production, we are just going to return the actual current time. Okay, so that's fine. Our test still works, but now we have a way to fetch the current time and now control that. So if we just go back to our test to make sure that we've got a proper failing test, we need to move the time forward. So I can say current time plus equals 5. It's a let, so we just need to do that. And that should still fail, but we've actually managed to move on 5 seconds, so that when we write the code, this will now should hopefully pass. Okay, so let's go back to how we're trying to access our value. So I'm just going to try something now. I need to add this functionality, I think, to like a getter and a setter somehow. So I'm going to just do var like a backing property for now. I don't know if I actually need to do this, but when I set the wrapped value, I'm going to say backing property equals new value, and when I get the equals new, so we can backing property needs to be the same, and when I get it, I want to say if the time is less than, if current time is less than the time to, if current time is, what are we actually trying to do here? Interesting. So I'm trying to say if the current time, oh well, what I've realized is I need to actually store the value that the time at the when we set the value, because we need to compare the current time to the time where we set it, to ensure that we're still valid within the time to live. So I'm going to need to store another property, which I'm just going to put here for now, and I'm going to say let the it's going to need to be a variable. Let var last set time, and that's a cf time. Oops, time interval. Okay, and that's fine because that could be. I'm going to set that to be optional. Self-used before all stored properties are initialized. Is it this that's kicking off? And I'm aware that this class itself is very like messy and they're all over the place at the moment, and that's fine. The key thing here with test-driven development, I'm just going to get this test to pass, and then I can go and safely refactor this and gather my thoughts a bit better. So it's perfectly fine that this looks really messy. I need obviously wrapped value there. Okay, so these are just my sort of thoughts in process. It might not be necessary, but we do need to make sure. Let's just ditch that again and say when I set the value, I'm going to say my backing property is going to equal the new value, and I'm also going to say the last set time is equal to the current time. So I'm going to grab that. Now I need to provide a getter, and then here I'm going to say if the current time is greater than the last set time plus the time to live, then I'm going to return nil. And otherwise, return the value. So I think we can actually just write that as it. I've sort of tried to write pseudocode, but I've pretty much written that. So I think if I say the current time, which I need to fetch there, is greater than the last set time plus the time to live, then return nil. Okay, and that's because at that point the current time has moved on, so it's expired. So let's have a look. I'm using a CF time interval, a double, and an int. Okay. So I specified the time to live as an int, but actually, because we're comparing it with the current time, which is a double, I'm going to change that to be a double. Whoops, double, and a double. A double here. Okay. And my last set time, that's a time. Yeah, so I need to get my last set time as well. So I need to unwrap it. So let's just say guard let last set time. And if I've not set anything, presumably I can return nil. Okay, and so that's if it's expired, and if it's not expired, I can return the backing property. Let's see, missing return in getter, expected to return. Let's just return nil here. Oh, I know what I've done. I didn't actually return that. There we go. So that still isn't passing. It still isn't compiling. So what have we done here? So I've spotted the issue that I've done, that's happened here. My problem is I'm trying to set the wrap value, and when I try and set it, I've got my setter and my getters here, and I'm going to say I'll let the last set time equal current time. Well, at that point in time, I haven't set the current time yet, the current time closure, because wrapped value is only just set. So I need to just move that one down to here, and move that one down to here. Okay, and that should hopefully it'll pass. Okay, it didn't pass, so we've obviously something's gone wrong in our logic, and that's okay. That's sort of what we're trying to get to, and then we're going to try and get rid of this ugly mess that we've got here. So if I were just to make that 6, I think it might be a greater than or equal to problem. It is, okay, because I'm saying the time to live is 5, and here I'm saying move forward 5 seconds, so we're still within that 5 seconds. So if I just put that back to what we wanted it to, well, I would probably say if it's 6 seconds, or in fact, look, because I'm working with a double, I can just do move forward 5.1, and so that will pass. That's fine. If it's 5 seconds, if you're 5 seconds on the nose, return the value. If not, just move on a little bit. So that's great. So we've got a test now that passes. And in fact, look, I think if I were to do function test cache is not invalidated before time to live has passed. Okay, like that. And I can take these here, pop them there. I can do the current time is going to equal 4.9, and then if that's the case, I'm going to expect that the value equals my test string. Now that might just pass straight away because that's the behavior that we've written in. Brilliant. Okay, so let's just go back and have a look. We've invalidated the cache value after the time to live expires, and we've also returned nil once the time to live has expired. That's brilliant. Okay. So what we've now got, I would say, is just 4 tests, but we're relatively confident that what we've written works. So now we can just go and tidy this up and actually make it look a lot nicer and a lot more readable, and we can have the confidence as we refactor that what we've done works. So the first thing I think I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and pull some of the logic into like, has the cache expired? So I have a property. I could just say if cache is expired or not. So I'm going to say var has cache expired, and it's Boolean. It's going to be a computed property, and I'm just going to say that if the current time, so fetch the current time is greater than the last set time plus the time to live, that should oh yeah, okay, so guard let last set time, otherwise I need to return something. Okay. And then this I now need to return. Okay, if I don't have a last set time, okay, that means we haven't actually set anything yet. I would say that the cache, I'm going to say that it's cache has expired. I think I would just go with false for that. Whoops. Okay, because we haven't actually set anything, so it hasn't expired. It's just there's nothing there. Okay. So now I can, in here, I can say if, well, let's name this something a bit more readable. If cache has expired. And now here I can pop if cache has expired. Lovely. let me just run my test. That should just work. And now I don't need to guardlet this here. What else could we do here? I think what I want to do is when I set the value, I want to sort of store that in its own little wrapper that has the value and the time that it was set, just so it's easier for us to access. So I'm going to just make a private struct within here. That is going to be, well, it's going to be a wrapper within a wrapper, but this is like an implementation detail that isn't visible from the outside. So I'm going to say just something like value wrapper. Might rename this, and it's going to be, well, this will also be generic over value, and I'm just going to store the value, which is of type value, and then I'm going to store the time set, which is going to be a time interval. So I might not need to do that. I can just access the same value. Yep, so I can just reference value here and it knows that it's talking about this value here. So that's good. So now I think I'm going to say that my backing property, let me just run my test, check that I've not broken anything. Brilliant. So now I'm actually going to say that my backing property is going to be a value wrapper. Okay, and when I set that, I'm going to say that when I set my wrap value, I'm going to say that the backing property is a what is it? It's going to be a value wrapper with the value, which is the new value, and the time set, which is going to be that. Oh yeah, okay, so this needs to be optional because we could also just set this to nil. So we always need to handle nils at every stage. Okay, so that's fine. And then here we're returning the backing property dot value, and that should pass. Brilliant. So we need backing property, of course, it needs to be private. And if I just run that, that should pass. But I've yeah. Oh no, that fails. Which is really good. My test string, but we're getting back nil. Interesting. Yeah, okay, so the cache invalidation, we've broken something. So this is really, really helpful. So we were expecting it to return nil, but it's returned a string. Why is that? Let's have a look. Well, what I've done here is I'm using a cache expired, and I'm using this last set time, which we store as a property here. But now we've switched to store our value in a backing property, and that's where we set the current time. But we don't use this this last set time anymore because we're storing it in our little value wrapper. So the cache expired. Now so basically I now need this cache has expired to fetch the time set from the value wrapper. So I need to say let last set time, that's going to equal the backing property dot time set, and then, well, let's just check. That should hopefully fix our failing test. Brilliant. Get rid of that. There we go. Close that. That's good. That's perfect example really there of why it's great to have that test and then to be able to refactor safely. So now I can ditch this last time set. I don't actually need that anymore. I'm going to make the time to live private, and I'm going to make the current time private, and I'm going to make the cache expired private. Okay, so we're getting quite a nice shape there. I'm just going to move this. I'm going to tidy this up and give it some labels. So I'm going to say this is my my types. I'm going to have a mark for this my properties, and let's move. I quite like to put my sort of those properties there, and then my computed properties here. And I'm just going to move all my privates up at the top, and let's get that there. And this is just personal preference. This is how I like to tidy things up. And then these are my initializers. Initializers. And I've got a couple of them there. Let's just run my test. Excellent. Okay. So what we've got there, I would say a nice, simple, very easy to read test suite. I'd say this makes a lot of sense here that we're taking the current time, adding a value to it, and checking our value, and checking that the value is updated as expected. And what we've got, it's a nice property wrapper that we are pretty confident works as as we expected it to, um, and we can refactor this and have a lot of confidence. If we wanted as well, I'm just gonna don't really like that underscore. It's not a particularly Swifty thing to do. So I'm actually going to just rename that backing property. It's really clear. We know what it is. And if I run that, all the tests should pass. And if we just go back and have a look, we've ticked off all these requirements, which I think we're happy with. And the cache value should persist as long as the time to live is valid. Yeah. And this would work. This is exactly how we've structured it. So I'd say we're done. I hope that's been okay. I didn't have too much of a plan. I just wanted to give you the idea of the flow of a proper test-driven development. If you've got any notes on my presenting or my code, please share. I'm happy. I always want to try and get better. So please let me know. Hope you enjoy.